On July 20th, 1969, humanity left its mark on the sands of the cosmos by setting foot on the moon. It was a truly remarkable moment, witnessed with awe by people across the globe. As Neil Armstrong famously declared, "One small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind." But there was much more to this leap, this man who took that step, than many people realized. In fact, Neil Armstrong harbored many secrets until his death, and now, 11 years after his passing, his family has made a startling revelation. Apparently, there was a lot humanity didn't know about this man. What secrets did Neil Armstrong keep until his death, and what has his family brought to light? Join us in this video as we delve into how Neil Armstrong died 11 years ago and uncover his family's revelations. If there's one name humanity will never forget when it comes to space exploration, it's Neil Armstrong. He etched his name forever in the annals of Earth's history with those small steps he took on the satellite. Ever since that day, he has gained global respect and a cult of heroism. But there was more to this achievement than people realized at the time, and many secrets were kept from the public. First off, Neil Armstrong's achievement took great sacrifice, effort, and discipline. It might be easy to think that all an astronaut, especially one like Armstrong, would do is just wear spacesuits and go on space explorations. But that's just a small part of it. Being an astronaut can be really challenging, especially if you're about to venture into a territory where no one has dared to go before. This is precisely the situation Neil Armstrong found himself in. No one had ever been to the moon before him, and it was uncertain how the surface would actually feel or what life-threatening events he might encounter there. A lot could go wrong, but Neil Armstrong was willing to give it a shot. For his journey to the moon to be successful, he needed to masterfully manage his mind, body, and scientific equipment. Before this epic journey, Neil Armstrong had dedicated about 3 years to training and preparations. He needed to experience beforehand what it would feel like to walk or move on the moon's surface. Walking in a gravity-free zone like walking on the surface of the moon could be quite awkward, so NASA simulated these exact conditions for Neil Armstrong and his partner, Edwin Buzz Aldrin. Part of the training involved learning to lie sideways in a gravity-free environment while being fixed and suspended at an angle. Alongside this, these individuals had to adhere to a strict diet and sleep routine. Armstrong and Buzz only ate specially prepared meals and snacks, so they were properly nourished and didn't gain any weight. Being overweight would affect their maneuverability on the lunar surface. NASA also wanted these men to get used to these snacks so they could easily carry and consume them during their lunar journey. Besides the diet control and simulation exercises, Armstrong also underwent survival training in deserts, open seas, and forests. Tackling these zones was meant to enhance their endurance and survival instincts should they encounter unexpected conditions. Armstrong and Aldrin were sometimes dropped off in remote areas without sufficient supplies. In some of these field training sessions, they practiced collecting various rock and soil samples to prepare for the sample collection experience on the moon. NASA had to ensure these men had all the knowledge, skills, and experience to effectively carry out their mission. The astronauts also had to learn photography, field mapping, and sample analysis skills all at once. They were trained to analyze, convey, and communicate information about rock samples. And they also learned how to use a range of scientific instruments to be used during the lunar journey. Among the areas where Armstrong and Aldrin conducted these field tests were the Grand Canyon and some volcanic formations in the Nevada National Security Site. NASA did everything they could to ensure the astronauts could effectively carry out their journey. And so, on July 20th, 1969, the astronauts were given final preparations and briefings. Armstrong had a light meal of eggs, steak, and coffee. This was specifically done to keep him light and prevent digestive issues during the flight. The liftoff to the moon was quite smooth and effortless, but things took a different turn as Armstrong and Aldrin got closer to touching down on the moon. You see, the Apollo 11 spacecraft had everything specifically designed for use outside of Earth. It wasn't remotely controlled like newer space probes. Apollo was a pilot spacecraft designed to work hand-in-hand with its pilots, in this case, Armstrong and Aldrin. And so, everyone at NASA was in shock and horror when Armstrong made a distress call. The computer had frozen, and was displaying an error message with the code 1202. NASA mission control officials frantically checked their records to remember what this code represented and guide the pilots on what to do. The astronauts were prepared for many unexpected events during their training, but experiencing this in real life and at the beginning of the mission was terrifying. The tension in Armstrong's voice was clearly noticeable. Apollo 11 was nearly 400,000 kilometers away from Earth, and there was no chance of a rescue attempt or anything of the sort. The only way NASA could help was to instruct the two on what to do in case of emergencies. It became a real emergency at the NASA base as Armstrong's connection with his team began to break up, and the computer was about to shut down. The crisis of Apollo 11 really began with the separation of the service module from the lunar module. Apollo 11 was made up of 3 distinct sections: the command module, the service module, and the lunar module. The service module housed the spacecraft's main propulsion system and mission supplies and consumables. The lunar module was a small compartment vehicle designed to enable Armstrong and Aldrin to land on the moon. It was given the name the Eagle. The command module was like the living quarters for the 3 men on this journey. Yes, there was one more part of the Apollo mission, but he didn't get as much attention as Armstrong and Aldrin. His name was Michael Collins. Michael Collins was the command module pilot. While Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were walking on the moon, he was orbiting the moon with it and awaiting their return. But before all of this, Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin had to overcome the challenge of landing the lunar module. At the time, Aldrin tried adjusting the module's antennas to see if it would give them a better and stronger communication signal to NASA, but it didn't work. NASA Mission Control on Earth was also having difficulty establishing a clear connection to space. Gene Kranz, who was the flight director for this exploration, found himself in a desperate situation. He might have had to abort the Apollo mission. The 1202 signal that Aldrin and Armstrong noticed on the module's operating system only indicated one thing: it was experiencing an overload. When NASA Mission Control learned of this, they thought they should immediately abort the mission to prevent the deaths of the young astronauts. But they decided to continue the mission. Aborting the mission in this scenario was as dangerous as proceeding, because in both cases, the astronauts still had to work with a faulty computer. And so, Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin had to do something different from what they had planned, taking manual control of the spacecraft as the computer started throwing up another error code, 1201. But this wasn't the end of the problems. The astronauts also realized they weren't at the right landing spot. Due to the moon's gravitational pull and the force from their separation from the command module, they had deviated from their position. Instead of seeing a smooth and even terrain as they had practiced during simulations in their training, Armstrong was met with a not-so-inviting landscape filled with numerous craters and giant boulders. It took Armstrong some time to find a flat and even surface where he could land the capsule, and even when he did, their landing was quite rough. According to Mission Control, the astronauts were following the planned trajectory to land on the moon. However, Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin had gone off course and were trying to make a landing. They were also running out of fuel quickly, and there was no time to waste. With only 60 seconds left, Armstrong, in a last-ditch effort, finally landed the capsule. The first thing Armstrong did when the console touched the moon was to send a message back to base: the Eagle has landed. Moreover, during the moon landings, Armstrong noticed what he thought were spaceships. It is rumored that he sent a coded message to NASA through a secret channel. "They're here. They're parked on the edge of the crater. They're watching us." Buzz Aldrin also confirmed that the spacecraft had followed them. He revealed that he had seen a UFO outside the spacecraft, but said they didn't communicate with it. While interesting, there was no video evidence for these claims, or if there was, it wasn't shared with the public. Oddly enough, Armstrong and Aldrin only shared details of these strange encounters in their first few interviews. In later interviews, they remained silent. Even today, there are many conspiracy theories that these men may have encountered aliens and hid it from the public. Also, astronauts who participated in subsequent moon missions confirmed seeing strange things. They claimed that these things shouldn't actually be on the moon. According to a claim by a retired NASA employee named William Rutledge, what was inspiring in this joint mission was that Armstrong and Aldrin had taken some pictures of strange structures that didn't appear natural on the moon. Also, during the Apollo 15 mission, astronauts had seen a large object on the far side of the moon, and officials thought it might be a spaceship. NASA made no comment on these allegations, not even a statement about the comments Armstrong and Aldrin made years ago. And so, the fact that aliens were on the moon remained a myth for the space agency. Also, no alien elements were reportedly found in the samples collected by Neil and Aldrin. As Neil Armstrong and his partner were trained, they spent a significant amount of time exploring the moon's surface, taking photographs, and collecting samples. These samples were stored in tightly sealed containers and transported back into space after landing. Armstrong and Aldrin also placed various devices on the moon's surface, one of which was made to monitor vibrations on the moon. Thanks to this monitoring device, scientists discovered that the moon, unlike what they initially thought, was an active and dynamic celestial body. The astronauts also placed a plaque on the surface of the moon, a plaque that read, "Here men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon, July 1969, AD. We came in peace for all mankind." In one fact, they could have spent much more time making more discoveries, but NASA had put a time limit on their mission. You see, even though NASA had prepared extensively for their trip, the organization didn't want to take any risks. They weren't sure the men's spacesuits could withstand the moon's atmospheric conditions, especially extreme temperatures that could reach 120 degrees. As a result, the astronauts returned to Earth with the approximately 23 kilograms of rock samples they had collected. Sometime after his death, Neil's wife, Carol Armstrong, found a white cloth bag in one of her husband's closets. It was filled with various artifacts and items belonging to the Apollo spacecraft. It turned out that the bag contained items such as Neil Armstrong's waist tether, utility lights, emergency wrench, and data acquisition camera. Upon returning from space, Armstrong had only told his partner, Michael Collins, that it was just a bunch of trash he wanted to bring back. This was the only statement he made about the artifacts bag. So far, it has not been understood why Neil Armstrong kept this bag hidden from even his family for over 40 years, especially as it contained items so closely associated with him during the space mission. Perhaps all this moon hero wanted to do was preserve the devices that saved his life during the deadly moon mission. Maybe one day, he would reveal this hidden collection to the world, but he didn't live long enough. Armstrong passed away on August 25, 2012, leaving behind his still-living partner, Buzz Aldrin. Getting back to our main topic, most people think Neil Armstrong died a natural death, but that's not entirely true. Neil Armstrong lost his life due to a medical error, and this fact was hidden from the whole world, and all the public knew when he died 11 years ago was that he died of illness. But that wasn't entirely true. Neil Armstrong's family revealed that he died due to poor medical care at the hospital where he was being treated. And the family had made a $6 million deal with the hospital in exchange for keeping the situation confidential. But then, someone from within the family leaked some key documents to the New York Times as proof of the confidentiality agreement signed upon Neil Armstrong's death. The hospital in question is Mercy Health Fairfield Hospital, located just outside Cincinnati. Armstrong had undergone bypass surgery at this hospital, but it wasn't the surgery that killed him. It was the post-operative treatments. The nurses had removed some devices that were vital in keeping him stable. As a result, complications arose, and Neil Armstrong suffered a severe hemorrhage and lost his life within a week. When they realized the mistake, the hospital panicked. They were afraid of the bad image that would stick to them and the sanctions they would likely face. The fear of bad publicity led the hospital to pay Armstrong's family $6 million to keep the matter confidential. When news agencies investigated the matter, the hospital declined to comment on the details of the agreement. And so, everyone learned that Neil Armstrong would perhaps still be alive, like his partner, if the medical staff had been a little more careful and attentive. The identity of the person who disclosed this situation is still unknown, but it is probably a family member. Whoever it is, at least now the world knows the truth about how this hero really died. See you in the next video. Goodbye.